Welcome to Stoic Origin. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. When was the last time someone crossed a line with you and you laughed it off? You told yourself, it's not worth the drama. You stayed quiet. You stayed polite. And later that night, you replayed the moment in your head, thinking of everything you should have said. That feeling right there? That tight, sinking feeling in your chest? That's not peace. That's self-betrayal. Most people don't lose respect all at once. They leak it, slowly, quietly, every time they tolerate something they know they shouldn't. Here's the hard truth nobody likes to say out loud. The world doesn't test your strength when you're loud. It tests it when you're tired, distracted, and just trying to get through the day. That's when unacceptable behavior slips in, not with explosions, but with small cuts. Jokes at your expense, subtle dismissals, little power plays that seem harmless until they stack up. And if you don't draw a line, someone else will draw it for you, usually right across your back. A Stoic mindset isn't about being cold or emotionless. It's about being unmovable, calm on the surface, solid underneath, like a mountain that doesn't argue with the wind. The wind either goes around it or breaks itself trying. Today, we're talking about behaviors that quietly destroy your self-respect if you let them stay. Not because you're weak, but because you were taught to be agreeable, to be nice, to keep the peace. And no one warned you that peace bought with your dignity is the most expensive deal you'll ever make. Let's start with the first one. Disrespect that's disguised as just joking. You know exactly what I mean. The comment that gets a laugh from everyone else, but lands wrong with you. The backhanded compliment. The sarcastic tone that only shows up when others are watching. And when you react, they hit you with, relax, man. You're too sensitive. Here's the rule most people learn too late. If a joke requires you to feel smaller, it's not a joke. It's a test. People test boundaries the same way kids test rules. They push a little, then wait. If nothing happens, they push more. Silence teaches them what they're allowed to do. Stoicism teaches this clearly. You don't control what people say, but you absolutely control what you allow to continue. You don't need a speech. You don't need anger. Sometimes all it takes is a pause, eye contact, and a calm. Don't talk to me like that. No insult. No explanation. Just a line in the sand. Most people back off immediately. And the ones who don't, they just told you everything you need to know. The second behavior is being constantly dismissed. Your ideas ignored. Your words talked over. Your presence treated like background noise. At work, in relationships, even with family. This one is dangerous because it trains you to shrink. You stop speaking up. You stop offering ideas. You tell yourself, it's fine. It's not that important. But over time, you start believing you're not that important. Here's a simple analogy. Imagine a smoke alarm that goes off once a week for no reason. At first, it scares you. Then it annoys you. Eventually, you stop reacting. Until the day there's a real fire and you don't move. Being dismissed over and over does the same thing to your mind. It numbs your sense of worth. A Stoic response isn't begging to be heard. It's choosing where you speak. You stop wasting words on people who aren't listening. You redirect your energy to places where your voice actually matters. That's not bitterness. That's strategy. The third behavior is subtle manipulation, guilt tripping, emotional pressure, making you feel responsible for other people's moods, failures, or bad decisions. They say things like, after everything I've done for you. Or, if you really cared, you would. And suddenly, you're carrying weight that was never yours. Here's the Stoic lens. You are responsible for your actions, not other people's reactions. Guilt is a powerful leash, and manipulators love people with good hearts, because good hearts hesitate to say no. But every time you say yes when you mean no, you teach your nervous system that your boundaries don't matter. Strength isn't cruelty. Strength is clarity. And clarity feels uncomfortable at first, especially if people are used to controlling you. Expect pushback. Expect surprise. That's not a sign you're wrong. That's a sign the old version of you is gone. Because once you stop tolerating what drains you, something strange happens. Your energy comes back. Your posture changes. Your voice steadies. And people start treating you differently. without you ever raising it. This is where real self-respect begins. Here's something most people don't realize until it's too late. The way people treat you is rarely random. It's a response to what you tolerate, what you excuse, and what you silently accept. Life is like a mirror that doesn't talk back. It just reflects. The next behavior that quietly destroys self-respect is inconsistency mixed with empty promises. People who say one thing and do another. Over and over. They hype you up, then disappear. They promise support, then vanish when it's time to show up. At first, you give them the benefit of the doubt. Everyone's busy. Everyone messes up sometimes. But patterns don't lie. When inconsistency becomes the rule, not the exception, what they're really telling you is this: your time isn't valuable to them. Stoicism teaches a brutal but freeing principle. Believe behavior, not words. Words are cheap. Effort costs something. Think of it like this. If someone borrowed your car every week and brought it back empty, scratched, and late, would you keep handing them the keys just because they apologized? Of course not. But when it comes to your time and energy, people do exactly that. The Stoic response isn't chasing explanations. It's adjusting access. You don't argue. You don't guilt trip. You simply stop prioritizing those who don't prioritize you. Quietly, calmly, without resentment. And here's the irony. The moment you stop overgiving, some people suddenly notice your value. Not because they changed, but because the discount ended. The fifth behavior is being treated as an emotional dumping ground. You're the one everyone vents to, complains to, cries to. But when you need support, silence, short replies, awkward distance. This one sneaks up on kind people, responsible people, the strong friend, the one who can handle it. But strength without boundaries turns into exhaustion. There's a difference between being supportive and being used. Support is mutual. Use is one-directional. Stoicism doesn't say you shouldn't help others. It says you shouldn't set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Your energy is a finite resource. Every yes costs something. And if you don't decide where it goes, someone else will. A simple test solves this. Ask yourself, if I stop being available, would this relationship still exist? If the answer scares you, that's your signal. You're allowed to say, I can't carry this right now. You're allowed to protect your mental space. You don't owe constant access to anyone, no matter how long you've known them. The sixth behavior is subtle disrespect of your boundaries. Not the obvious kind, the sneaky kind. They push a little. You say nothing. They push again. You explain yourself. They push more. You get frustrated. And suddenly you're the bad guy for changing or acting different. Here's the Stoic truth most people avoid. Boundaries don't require permission. You don't negotiate them. You enforce them. A boundary explained too many times becomes a suggestion, and suggestions invite debate. The calmest, strongest people aren't the ones who argue the most. They're the ones whose behavior makes the rules obvious. When you say no once and stand by it, you teach people how to treat you without raising your voice. And yes, some people will leave when you stop bending. Let them. Not everyone is meant to stay once you stop being convenient. Now, let's zoom out for a second. All of these behaviors share one common thread. They feed on hesitation, on self-doubt, on the fear of being disliked. But Stoicism flips the question completely. Instead of asking, how do I get them to respect me? It asks, what kind of person do I respect? A person who keeps their word, who values their time, who doesn't explain themselves into exhaustion, who remains calm under pressure, who doesn't chase validation. Respect isn't demanded, it's embodied. Think of a lighthouse. It doesn't run around convincing ships to avoid the rocks. It just stands firm, bright, unmoving, and the ships adjust. When you stop tolerating what drains you, your nervous system recalibrates. You breathe deeper. You react slower. You stop needing to win every argument because you're no longer fighting for scraps of validation. That's when people feel it. Not because you became louder, but because you became solid. This isn't about becoming harsh or closed off. It's about becoming selective, intentional, grounded, The Stoics believed you should be strict with yourself and gentle with others. But gentle doesn't mean weak. Gentle doesn't mean available to abuse. Gentle means controlled strength, and controlled strength is rare. In the next part, we're going to talk about what happens after you stop tolerating these behaviors, the internal shifts, the external reactions, and why some people will suddenly test you harder the moment you change. The moment you stop tolerating what used to drain you, something strange happens. Not peaceful, not quiet, strange. The world doesn't immediately reward you with respect and calm. It tests you, harder than before. This is where most people get confused and turn back. See, when you change your standards, people who benefited from the old version of you feel it instantly. Even if they can't explain it, they sense a shift. Your tone is calmer. Your answers are shorter. Your availability drops. And that triggers discomfort. So they poke. They bring up the past. You never used to be like this. They question your motives. Who put this in your head? They guilt you. I guess I don't matter to you anymore. Understand this clearly. Resistance is not proof you're wrong. It's proof the dynamic changed. Stoicism prepares you for this moment. It teaches that external reactions are outside your control, but your response is not. You don't defend. You don't over-explain. You don't argue your growth into existence. You let the discomfort exist. Imagine training a wild horse. The moment you stop letting it drag you, it pulls harder. Not because it's evil, but because it's confused. If you hold steady, it eventually adjusts. If you let go, it learns nothing. The next behavior to watch for during this phase is passive aggression, silence, withholding, subtle punishment meant to pull you back into old habits. They stop replying. They act distant. They forget things that matter to you. This is a test of emotional independence. Most people cave here. They reach out, apologize for boundaries they shouldn't apologize for, smooth things over just to relieve the tension. But Stoicism asks a different question. Why does someone else's discomfort feel more urgent than your own peace? Silence is not an emergency. Distance is not danger. Sometimes it's information. If someone can only be close to you when you're overgiving, that closeness was conditional. And conditional respect is not respect. It's a transaction. Here's where your internal work matters. You must get comfortable being misunderstood. Strong people are often misread at first. Calm boundaries can look like coldness to those who relied on chaos. Self-control can look like arrogance to those who live on impulse. That's the price of self-respect, and it's cheaper than the cost of self-betrayal. Now let's talk about your inner world, because this is where the real battle happens. When you stop tolerating nonsense, your mind will try to pull you back. Old habits don't die quietly. You'll hear thoughts like, maybe I overreacted. Maybe I should have handled that differently. What if I'm being too harsh? This isn't intuition. It's conditioning. Your brain is used to a certain level of stress. When that stress disappears, it searches for it. Like background noise suddenly going quiet. The silence feels wrong at first. Stoicism teaches you to observe these thoughts without obeying them. Thoughts are weather. You are the sky. You don't chase clouds. A practical tool here is what the Stoics called negative visualization. Ask yourself, if I go back to tolerating this, where does it lead in 6 months? A year? More resentment, more exhaustion, less self-respect. Then ask the opposite. If I hold this boundary, what does my life look like long-term? Fewer people maybe, but better ones. More energy, clearer mornings, deeper sleep, short-term discomfort for long-term freedom. That's the trade. Another shift you'll notice is this. You stop craving closure. When you were tolerating everything, you needed explanations, apologies, understanding. You wanted people to get it. Now, you realize closure is something you give yourself. Not everyone needs to agree with your decision. They just need to respect it. And if they don't, you already have your answer. This is where Stoicism becomes power, not philosophy. You stop reacting emotionally to provocation. Not because you're numb, but because you're centered. When someone tries to bait you, you feel it and choose not to bite. That choice rewires you. Your nervous system learns safety doesn't come from approval. It comes from alignment. from doing what you know is right, even when it's uncomfortable. And here's the quiet reward no one talks about. When you stop tolerating disrespect, you become more relaxed, not tenser. Your shoulders drop. Your jaw unclenches. You laugh more easily because you're no longer carrying unspoken resentment everywhere you go. That's why real strength looks calm. Chaos is exhausting. In the next part, we're going to talk about how to set boundaries without becoming bitter, aggressive, or isolated. How to keep your humanity while protecting your spine. Because the goal isn't to push everyone away. It's to make room for what actually deserves you. One of the biggest lies people believe about boundaries is that they make you cold, distant, or hard to love. That if you stop tolerating nonsense, you'll end up alone, angry, and isolated. That only happens when boundaries are built from bitterness instead of clarity. There's a massive difference. Bitterness says, I'm protecting myself because people are terrible. Clarity says, I'm protecting myself because my energy matters. Stoicism isn't about building walls. It's about installing doors. You decide who gets access, how much, and under what conditions. Let's talk about how to set boundaries without turning into someone you don't recognize. First, drop the need to be understood. This is where most people fail. They explain, then explain again, then over-explain, hoping the other person will finally nod and say, okay, now I get it. But here's the uncomfortable truth. People don't need to understand your boundary to respect it. They just need consequences. Think about traffic laws. You don't need to understand why the speed limit is 65. You follow it because there's a ticket if you don't. Boundaries work the same way. Not with punishment, but with consistency. If someone speaks to you disrespectfully and you keep engaging the same way, you taught them nothing. If you calmly disengage, end the conversation, or remove access, you taught them everything. No yelling, no drama, just cause and effect. Second, keep your boundaries boring. Emotion is gasoline for manipulation. When you sound fired up, defensive, or emotional, people sense an opening. The Stoic approach is neutral and brief. I'm not available for that. That doesn't work for me. I'm going to pass. That's it. No essay. No apology tour. No backstory. If silence follows, let it. Silence is often the boundary doing its job. Third, expect a delay in respect. This part frustrates people. You don't set a boundary once, and suddenly everything's fixed. People test consistency. They want to see if this is a phase or a permanent change. Stay steady. Imagine pushing against a vending machine. If it moves once, you keep pushing. If it doesn't move at all, you stop. Your consistency teaches people what effort is pointless. Fourth, watch who adjusts without resentment. This is huge. Healthy people adapt. They might stumble, but they try. They don't punish you for having limits. They don't take it personally. Unhealthy people keep score. They sulk. They make you feel guilty for choosing yourself. That difference tells you who belongs in your life going forward. Now let's address something deeper. The fear underneath all of this. The real fear isn't conflict. It's abandonment. A lot of people tolerate disrespect because they're afraid of losing connection. But connection that requires self-erasure is not connection. It's captivity. Stoicism teaches voluntary discomfort. Choosing short-term discomfort over long-term regret. Saying no now instead of resenting later. And here's the paradox. The more you respect yourself, the less you fear being alone. Because you're no longer abandoning yourself to keep others close. At this stage, you may notice your circle getting smaller. That's not failure. That's filtration. Quality replaces quantity. You also start attracting a different kind of person. People who are direct, calm, grounded. People who don't need constant emotional chaos to feel alive. That's not luck. That's alignment. Let's talk about compassion, because boundaries without compassion turn into rigidity. Stoicism doesn't say people are evil. It says people act according to their nature and conditioning. Some were never taught respect. Some confuse kindness with weakness. Some are fighting their own battles. Understanding that helps you let go of anger. But understanding doesn't mean tolerating. You can wish someone well and still keep your distance. You can forgive without reopening the door. Forgiveness is internal. Access is earned. That distinction will save you years of frustration. Here's a powerful mental reframe. Every boundary you set is a vote for the kind of life you want. Not against others, but for yourself. You're not being difficult. You're being deliberate. And deliberate people move differently. They don't rush into conversations. They don't chase approval. They don't explain themselves into exhaustion. They move with quiet confidence. In the next part, we're going to talk about how this new way of living affects your work, relationships, and daily decisions. How self-respect compounds over time and creates momentum you can feel. Because once you stop tolerating what drains you, you start building something most people never do. A life that actually feels like yours. By now, something should be clear. This isn't just about dealing with other people. This is about who you become when no one is watching. Because once you stop tolerating disrespect, manipulation, and chaos on the outside, you're forced to confront something on the inside. Your standards. Most people think standards are about other people. They're not. Standards are about what you allow yourself to live with. The noise you accept. The excuses you make. The habits you keep repeating even though you know better. Here's the uncomfortable shift that happens at this stage. When your external life gets cleaner, your internal life gets louder. You start noticing things you used to drown out. Procrastination, self-sabotage, empty distractions. That voice that says, "I'll do it tomorrow." Stoicism doesn't let you hide from that. You can't demand respect from the world while disrespecting your own potential. You can't protect your time from others while wasting it yourself. Integrity isn't selective. It's total. This is where discipline enters the picture. Not motivation, not hype. Discipline. Discipline is self-respect in action. Think of it like this. If someone constantly canceled on you, showed up late, and broke promises, you'd stop trusting them. Your brain works the same way with yourself. Every time you break a promise to yourself, you erode internal trust. And when you don't trust yourself, confidence collapses. That's why Stoics emphasized small, repeatable actions. Wake up when you say you will. Do the work even when you don't feel like it. Keep your word, especially when it's inconvenient. Not because anyone's watching, but because you are. Another shift happens here. You stop negotiating with weakness. Most people live in constant negotiation with their lower impulses. Just this once. I deserve a break. It's been a long day. Sometimes that's fine. But when it becomes a pattern, it becomes a cage. Stoicism teaches you to see urges as temporary visitors, not commands. You don't argue with them. You don't obey them. You let them pass. Urges are waves. You are the shore. This level of self-mastery changes how people perceive you without you saying a word. Your presence becomes grounded. You're not reactive. You're not scattered. You move with intention. That's when opportunities start showing up. Not because the universe is rewarding you, but because people trust calm, consistent individuals. They give responsibility to those who don't crumble under pressure. Now let's talk about loneliness, because it shows up here. When you raise your standards internally and externally, you may feel isolated for a while. Old distractions don't hit the same. Shallow conversations feel draining. You start craving depth. This isn't depression. It's transition. Stoicism reminds you that solitude is not emptiness. It's space. Space to think. Space to refine. Space to rebuild. Some of the strongest people in history had long seasons of quiet, not because they were lost, but because they were becoming. Use this phase wisely. Read. Train your body. Sharpen your skills. Build something that doesn't depend on applause. This is where self-respect compounds silently. Another powerful realization lands here. You stop chasing outcomes. You stop obsessing over how things should turn out. You focus on what's in your control. Effort, attitude, preparation. This reduces anxiety dramatically. When you do your part fully, you sleep better, even if things don't work out, especially if they don't. Because failure handled with integrity doesn't damage self-respect. Avoidance does. The Stoics had a phrase for this. Tranquility through order. When your actions align with your values, your mind calms down. No inner war. No constant second-guessing. And here's the final internal shift of this phase. You stop needing to prove anything. You don't flex. You don't explain your choices. You don't argue with people who don't matter. Your life becomes the explanation. That's real confidence. Quiet, stable, unshakable. Not because you believe you're better than others, but because you're no longer at war with yourself. In the final part, we'll tie everything together. How to maintain this mindset long-term, how to handle setbacks without collapsing, and how to live with calm authority in a world that thrives on chaos. Because this isn't a phase, it's a way of being. If there's one thing you need to understand about this path, it's this. Self-respect is not something you achieve once and keep forever. It's something you practice daily, quietly, especially when no one's clapping. Life will test you again. Old patterns will try to sneak back in during moments of stress, loneliness, or fatigue. That doesn't mean you failed. It means you're human. Stoicism was never about perfection. It was about correction. When you slip, you don't spiral. You don't shame yourself. You notice. You adjust. You return to center. That ability to come back without self-hatred is what separates growth from burnout. One of the most important skills to build now is recovery. Not just physical recovery, but mental and emotional recovery. Bad day. You don't blow up your routine. You anchor to the basics. Sleep, movement, food, stillness. These are not luxuries. They are stabilizers. The Stoics believed that a well-ordered life reduces unnecessary suffering. Chaos multiplies pain. Order contains it. This is why routines matter. Not rigid schedules, but rhythms. Morning silence, evening reflection. A few minutes to ask yourself simple questions. Did I act with integrity today? Where did I compromise? What can I do better tomorrow? No judgment, just honesty. That honesty keeps you grounded. Another long-term challenge you'll face is success. Yes, success. As your self-respect grows, people will notice. Opportunities increase. Attention follows. And with it comes temptation, ego, comparison, overconfidence. Stoicism keeps you balanced here. You remember that external praise is unstable. Today they cheer. Tomorrow they forget. So you don't build your identity on applause. You stay focused on process, on effort, on character. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire and still reminded himself daily that he was just a man doing his duty. That humility protected him from arrogance and despair alike. That mindset still works today. Another reality. Not everyone will come with you. Some relationships will fade permanently. That can hurt, even when it's necessary. Stoicism doesn't tell you to be heartless. It tells you to be realistic. People are chapters. Not all are meant to be the whole book. Grieve what ends. Appreciate what was. And don't drag the past into a future it doesn't belong in. That emotional maturity keeps you light. Now let's talk about authority. Not the loud kind, but the calm kind. Calm authority comes from alignment. When your words match your actions. When your boundaries are steady. When you don't need to dominate to feel strong. People feel safe around that energy. They trust it. They listen. And those who don't, they drift away naturally. You no longer chase respect. You radiate it. The final piece of this puzzle is purpose. Without purpose, boundaries feel like restrictions. With purpose, they feel like protection. Ask yourself, what am I building? Who am I becoming? What kind of man do I respect? Let your answers guide your decisions. When a request comes in, you don't ask, will they be upset if I say no? You ask, does this move me closer to or further from my values? That single filter simplifies life dramatically. And here's the quiet reward at the end of all this work. You wake up without dread. You move through your day without constant friction. You speak when it matters. You stay silent when it doesn't. You feel solid. Not because life got easy, but because you got strong. The Stoics believed the goal of life wasn't pleasure or status. It was inner freedom. Freedom from being controlled by fear, impulse, or other people's opinions. That freedom is available to anyone willing to stop tolerating what corrodes them. You don't need to announce your change. You don't need to explain it. You just live it. And over time, your life starts to feel quieter, clearer, more intentional. That's not boredom. That's peace. And peace earned through self-respect, is one of the rarest things in the modern world. If this resonated, don't rush back into noise. Sit with it. Apply one boundary. Keep one promise to yourself today. Small actions, done consistently. That's how a strong life is built. Calm, clear, unshakable. That's the Stoic way. Don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to Stoic Origin.